Yeah, we don't have an official sub headliner for the panel, so I feel like we can kind of take it wherever we want. We have a ragtag group of people I've known online for in some cases years now. So Billy, just tell a little bit about yourself and yeah.
Billy Restey, artist, creator. Jumped into ordinals pretty early. Created ordinal shards, cipher glyphs, and just constantly kind of pushing the limits of Bitcoin and inscribing as much as possible when the mempool clears to 2 sats per VByte after the sats BRC20 minted out.
Bruff.
Hi everybody, my name is Brian Laughlin. There we go, testing. Hi everybody, my name is Brian Laughlin. Go by Bruffstar on the interwebs. I'm the co-founder of OrdinalsBot. We launched way back in February 7th, and we make it really easy for people to inscribe Bitcoin, drag and drop interface, and since then we've been building out some really cool developer API tooling and try to make it really easy for people to get onboarded and build some cool stuff in the space. It's been a wild few months, but really exciting.
I was going to say, while I was waiting for my prune node to upgrade to a full node, I used Brian's service, OrdinalsBot, to inscribe the Laser Eyes Mona Lisa. It was 7523. They didn't have the infrastructure set up. It got lost, and I was in Discord for months just trying to get it
You were
up.
running a node before Ordinals?
No, wait, he has to say the next part, because that sounds bad.
Yeah, man.
But a prune node.
Yeah, so I was in Mexico on a family vacation. Ordinals dropped. I was refreshing ordinals.com. I was stoked. It was like 400. It was going pretty slow. I thought about bringing my family home, but
so you could get a sub 1K.
To my dismay, I got home and I was like, wow, I gotta resync this thing from the jump, and it took a while. Actually, the Ordinals punk guy inscribed the first Ordinal shard around 85-75. And because once you get a node synced, then you have to sync Ord, and it's like, man, it was crazy. I'll never forget those days. There was just this mad rush. People were just like, hey, we know what this is, we know the power of this, and we want to inscribe our legacy.
It's important to say we got it to you in the end, though.
They did get it. I thought they were trying to keep it at first. I was like, what is with the friction?
I remember that things were ramping up, and then shit got really wild whenever this guy came in. Eric, who are you, and who's your tailor?
So my name is Eric Wall. I'm a Taproot Wizard number 2. I'm a co-founder of the Taproot Wizards. For us, Ordinals is for me and my co-founder Udi Wertheimer. Ordinals is a part of a cultural war. We've been in Bitcoin for a long time, and it was Taproot Wizard was really a response to the current culture in Bitcoin. If you look around for Bitcoin culture and you look around Twitter and you see that people that like Bitcoin try to signal their appreciation for Bitcoin by putting laser eyes on their profile pictures. Unfortunately, associated with those laser eyes is also, what you should eat for food, how you should raise a family, and which war you should be interested in, and just weird things that doesn't have anything to do with Bitcoin. And one of the most important things is that you don't actually use Bitcoin because spending is sort of a sin. And so that sort of culture didn't really cultivate a community that battle-tested the chain, whereas we feel that we actually got to try to use Bitcoin, not necessarily even for us, but so that we know that the system is useful for a large user base, so that we've actually solved the scalability and the UX challenges. So for us, it's like Taproot Wizard is a way to give a face to the Bitcoin, a way to be a Bitcoiner that doesn't need that you have to put on laser eyes. Right?
But you've managed to dodge the question of who your tailor is.
Since this is a small, so please don't share it.
Please don't tweet this.
Yeah, so it's made by Rosal Khan, the American rap artist who stole $4.5 billion worth of Bitcoin together with her husband. She pled guilty. Her husband is in jail, so she's on house arrest. She did it while she had a foot.
She's got a little extra time on her hands to
No, she loves the way that she actually crashed the Taproot Wizard party in New York. She said that she went there by an accident. And
Where did she think she was going?
she said that she was going to another art show, 2 stores. It was like a big art house, and there was some art stuff that was happening on the floor above. And we had a party on the first floor. She is a social engineer, though, so I think that she's been social engineering me. But I got this sweet robe. I paid a
Who's
thousand.
laughing now?
Right. No, I think she's still laughing because I had to pay $1,000 for the robe. So you know, hustlers gotta hustle. You know.
That was a roller coaster of a story. So we are supposed to talk about Bitcoin as a canvas, and we haven't even gotten to like my first question, which is I kind of throw it back to you, Eric, because one of my points is like, so Casey, you know, wanted to put this stuff, we may call them NFTs, on Bitcoin, but you know, as longtime Bitcoiners, I've seen Bitcoin used as a canvas well before inscriptions. Inscriptions just kind of really codified it. And so, Eric, if you've done your homework, Bitcoin's kind of been used as an artistic or messaging canvas over the years. Can you give me a little bit of prehistory, I would say inscription prehistory, about Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I was looking up some specific examples before this panel. I think there's one particular example that stood out to me in particular that I want to bring up. So I don't know if you guys noticed it or if you even know who Luke Dash Jr., Luke Jr., the guy who, he's a core developer, very Catholic. He absolutely hates ordinals. He wrote a ordinals disrespecter software that doesn't, like if you're a miner, this software doesn't allow ordinal inscriptions to get into mempools. It's like censorship software that he designed. So he absolutely hates ordinals and thinks that you should not use Bitcoin in that way. But what I found was that back in 2011, Luke Jr. ran a mining pool that was called the Eligius pool. And I don't know how much you know about mining, but when you are running a miner, you have a place for you to put a random message as the miner, where some miners write like the name of their mining pool, but you also have some arbitrary data space there just so that you can, like if you run out of nonces in the mining process, you can change this arbitrary data space to whatever you want. And he was putting Catholic prayers in there, and it apparently upset a lot of other people that why are you putting all this Catholic bullshit in the... So he doesn't actually have a problem with putting arbitrary data into Bitcoin. It's just, it has to be the kind of data that he likes. And it kind of goes against like the permissionless nature of Bitcoin. Like it shouldn't be like, oh, but only the data that I like is fine using the Bitcoin as a canvas for.
You can only use
Bitcoin
Bitcoin if you're using it properly.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think back to when I think of like art on Bitcoin, there's an iconic ASCII art, I believe it was an opera turn, of Len Sassaman, who, well known, some have speculated he was Satoshi. And there was kind of a cool ASCII art picture of his face. I think is really cool.
Yeah, that was back in 2011. So these tools have existed for a long time. The ability to make larger images changed with segregated witness. So there's been people that have been putting full actual JPEGs on the chain back then, before Taproot scripts were sort of conducive to this activity. There's, for example, a very high resolution picture of Nelson Mandela, and the way that they inscribed it was that they sent a bunch of Bitcoin to a bunch of Bitcoin addresses, and each address wasn't a real address, it was just some bytes that were encoded as an address. So if you take the hexadecimals of those addresses and you turn them into Unicode and you serialize them one after another, then you would get, first the file name of the Nelson Mandela JPEG, and after that it was just the bytes for the image itself. So people have been doing it for a long time. What happened with Taproot was that you only needed one single transaction input in order to put all the JPEG data in one transaction. So it made it materially easier to write a protocol for inscribing data, but it has been in the Bitcoin culture since all time. It's just gotten a lot more popular now.
And so now we finally get to the inscriptions era of Bitcoin as a canvas. I'm going to throw it back to Bruffstar over here, who I would say is almost like the backbone of Bitcoin, industrial Bitcoin data injection, you could say. Could you talk to me about what you do and kind of you and OrdinalsBot thought process behind just it's the big idea of putting stuff on Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think we get a lot of inbound from people really excited about joining the space and they want to inscribe their first thing, whether it's from individual artists or collections or communities coming from other chains. And you know, if you're coming from the Ethereum chain, there was essentially no limit to what you minted or what you pointed to somewhere randomly on the internet. So they kind of come in expecting similar thing where they say, hey, I've got 10,000 4-megabyte JPEGs, go. And you're like, well, okay.
That's 4 gigabytes. That's like
Yeah.
2% of the entire block space of the year. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's a lot of educational step, which is really, you know, I don't mind doing. You know, everyone has to do it, and I've kind of enjoyed it because it makes me, you know, every time you do that, you get better at explaining it to people as well. But and also everyone's artwork's kind of slightly different. So if it's a vector-based artwork versus like a rasterized image, you know, if it's an SVG, you've got many more kind of a compression alternatives. But you know, a lot of the people are just coming with straight up JPEGs or PNGs. And you know, it's been a challenge to try and get it down to a decent size without compromising the quality. There's been some really bad examples of that, and I think there's been some really good examples of people compressing things and getting them out there. And I think over the last kind of a few months, things like recursive inscriptions have really helped kind of take that to the next level where you can just inscribe the traits individually, and then you're actually just inscribing an HTML file. These HTML files are actually like 400 bytes, where they can link to traits which are 2,000 by 2,000 pixels. And one thing that I come up with pretty early was the fact that you can actually, instead of just outputting the images in individual layers on the HTML file, the downside of that is that when you right-click and save or whatever, the first one, it's only saving that top layer. I utilized the canvas HTML element where you can rebuild the layers inside that canvas element. And because it's one single element on the HTML page, it gives a really nice image-like feeling to it because it resizes like an image. You can right-click and save it like an image. You can copy it like an image. And just those little things I've been learning over time and making it really easy for people to come on board. But I think that no matter what kind of collection it is, that you'll find a way to represent it well on Bitcoin. Some other people kind of lean into the fact that there's a limitation. I've seen a lot of great artwork with like nice glitchy effects, and those are the really easy ones because you can optimize them to the moon, and then it's glitchy, but actually they've just optimized it like 200%. But they can lean into it, and I think that leans into the Bitcoin as a canvas because you're using your kind of and I think artists like that. They like having kind of a boundaries, and these are the tools that you've got. So go make something.
Yeah, you got shut off because you were talking too long. I'm just kidding. No,
Rugged.
Well, like so you know I think about you provide this service, and it's kind of funny because it just seems like we go without saying this because we talked a lot about this back in February, where if you compare art in the meat space, you paint a painting, you carve something into some material. You know that once you do that, that exists in perpetuity. Obviously, it decays with time, but like that exists in perpetuity, and it's like you to take this time and energy, and you do it once, and that's created. But what has felt for me like the disconnect between the NFT world and other blockchains, which has this strong cultural layer, but that actual data is kind of an ongoing running cost, whether you have to host the servers yourself or you're exposed to the IPFS decaying. And so what Bitcoin allows is, as I think Casey was saying something like this, it's like the true vision of what an NFT is, where it's a one-time spend. You pay Brian once, or you do it yourself. You pay the Bitcoin network once, and it's on there for forever. And in a way, in the same way that those statues and those paintings in the meat space do decay with time, maybe thousands of years, they don't decay on Bitcoin. They're there forever. And so that just simple change in the way art, and the medium that art exists on, and the canvas it exists on, is one of the most kind of revolutionary things I think is happening right now. It's such a simple concept, but we often, I still kind of am dumbfounded by this new idea. Billy, I haven't asked you a question a bit. We're talking about Bitcoin as a canvas.
Well, yeah, I think Satoshi with the Genesis block, like he inscribed his own message in there, and I think I consider that like the first kind of digital artifact to me, and I think that's pretty cool. When you look at Bitcoin as a data layer, I mean, you know, I'm inscribing art, some other people are inscribing information, and I think it's like the world's library where everyone can like read a book on it, but they can't like rearrange the books, and I think that's so powerful. And we've had some pretty, you know, charged talks today about just like the levity of this technology and don't waste it, and, you know, really consider like what you're putting on there. So I'm always thinking like, you know, would Satoshi be proud of this project, you know, like in the back end. But as far as like the limitations of Bitcoin, I think it's pretty fun to like bounce into those limitations and kind of find a way to kind of break them and just kind of push the limits and kind of hack things together. And building off the Taproot Wizards kind of 4 mega, you know, a lot of artists, they were coming in, like Brian was saying, you know, they have like, you know, put this 20 megabyte file or whatever, and you're like, yeah, even if you worked with a miner, the max you can get is 4 megabytes and just kind of dominate a block. So one thing that I came up with was this project Metablocks, where basically I inscribed 400 inscriptions, and then with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you basically parse them back together into one full image. It was 16,000 by 16,000 pixels. You would never really want a piece of art that big. It was pretty much just like,
It breaks like most explorers that you try to use it on.
it loads like pixel by pixel each inscription. It's pretty cool. That is a feature, not a bug. But it was a lot of fun. It's 256 megapixels. I think it was like over 6 megabytes. Just kind of showing the populace, you know, all these Twitter spaces saying, oh, well, you can't put this and that. It's like, no, you're just not having an open mind, man. Like, get involved. Like, mix it up.
Yeah, and what Billy is talking about is what I think is perhaps the most interesting direction of Ordinals inscription art. Because I think if you just, well, I don't want to shit on people that just think, okay, well, Bitcoin is a great data availability layer for me to store my regular non-really Bitcoin-related art on. Like, if you want to do that, that is fine. It's a permissionless network. But the one thing that I'm a bit more of a fan of, the thing that I think is pretty cool and a bit like punk rock, is when the nature of inscribing itself, if you treat that like an art form. So, for example, with the you mentioned the 4 megabyte block. So, when we inscribed the Taproot Wizard first inscription that was 4 megabytes, we had to work with the mining pool and get them to, you know,
Who'd you work with?
It was Luxor.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So we had to get them to basically take a risk on that we could remove some of the safety guards inside their Bitcoin mining software and mine a non-standard block. It's only miners that can mine non-standard blocks and get them accepted into the network. So I mean, it feels a bit like, you know, you have a skateboard, and then if you're a miner, you're all the time you're just trying to make your skateboard go faster, right? But this is like doing skateboard tricks a little bit. So you're not only
If Sisyphus were doing skate tricks up the mountain, that's
yeah,
kind of what
and I
mining
think
is.
that is also an art form. Like that, it's not necessarily the picture of the wizard that is, you know, this piece of art. It's more the challenging task of getting a very, you know, complex technical problem achieved in a short span of time before anyone else does it. And so there's a bunch of different ways that you can do that. For example, what you talked about with like making something recursive and, you know, referencing each other, and, you know, those types of things, like treating it more like, you know, you want to do something that impresses people, you know, both as a piece of art. And so the confines, like the restrictions of Bitcoin, actually gives you an art medium where you can innovate and experiment. So yes, we have very little space, but if you think about, for example, the demo scene that used to, like, if you're familiar with the demo scene where they have these tiny, like 46 kilobyte programs, and when you run them, you see like a fractal dimension of a three-dimensional world, and you're like, holy fucking shit, how did all that fit into that small, tiny little file? That is also like, that's an art form. So the type of art that, you know, I'm most bullish on is the type of art that sort of merges these technical limitations and challenges and doesn't see them as limitations, but sees them as sort of the canvas on which they're meant to operate.
That's a great jumping off point to a topic that I haven't heard much about today, which is generative art. Billy, I know you've got some generative projects, but I remember, I think I was talking with Casey and him saying something like one of his reasons and one of his motivations is he's a huge fan of generative art on other blockchains. One of my favorite projects is on Ethereum. It's the kind of Taken's theorem. They take this very interesting data visualization approach to imagery. And, but, we see at the generative art level the confluence of tech and visual medium. Billy, can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe talk a little about P5.js?
Yeah, man, generative art is actually perfect for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is software, it's code. I mean, when you see these inscriptions and you're like, what, 2 kilobytes? And it's infinitely scalable. You like open it in a new window, it's like resizing to whatever screen you're at. Like that's the canvas, and I think it's sick. I think it's a massive unlock, probably slept on a bit. The ETH folks have their the whole art block setup, which is like not really technically on chain. It's being hosted, but yeah, it's hard to tell people like you've built all this value on sand. We want to be building on concrete, and but yeah, as far as generative art goes, that's where I'm interested in, and I gotta shout out On-Chain Monkey, Danny. I had a project where I needed to basically inscribe the P5.js library, which is above that cutoff, and it's not like you can split it into 4 images and inscribe those separately and then parse it back together. And they have a handy, really cool GitHub where it's essentially drag and drop, and basically using some wizardry magic, it pretty much compresses it with like binary base 64. And it's just really incredible because that's another thing where, you're working, they're not really limitations, you're just finding kind of creative solves to get this incredible art like infinitely scalable onto Bitcoin, which is also very cognizant and aware of, your data footprint essentially.
I got the 5-minute warning, so I'm gonna get right to the end, which is Bitcoin is a canvas for a medium, but it's also a blank slate tabula rasa for culture. In a way, we see here a very uncharacteristic to the past half-decade type of Bitcoin culture forming, and a lot of people say, oh, ETH was the test net, but they mean like the technical test net. I'm like, to me, it seems that ETH is almost a cultural test net as well, to allow these new communities and ideas to incubate, and I want to invite that innovative culture to Bitcoin. And if I look across here, Eric's been in the Bitcoin scene for a long time, but a bit of a black sheep recently. And Billy, you've been in Bitcoin a long time too, but your work has mainly and interest has been on ETH. And Brian, you've also been Bitcoin adjacent, but not like L1 Bitcoin. Could each of you talk a bit about your like how you see Bitcoin as a blank canvas, perhaps in your own story or in a broader culture, and your hopes and perhaps an optimistic look at the future for Bitcoin? Billy.
Yeah, I'll go first. When I think about Bitcoin, I think about like I'm going to be passing my Bitcoin to my son. I firmly believe that. I've been mining Bitcoin for years. I have a shed full of S19J Pros. I was running a prune node. But yeah, it's a massive opportunity, and like it's the intersection of everything I love: free markets, open source, decentralized. I mean, look at this crowd and this community. This is day 3. I think we're all kind of running on fumes. It was cool to see the Bitcoin conference be like a small Ordinals conference as well, but just like everyone kind of converging with, we're all here for like a common interest and a common goal, and I think that's just really cool. But Bitcoin's a huge opportunity to kind of inscribe your legacy. Just think of it as a giant kind of file server that no one can fuck with. I mean, it's pretty powerful. I mean, Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. I think ETH was a testnet is maybe a good analogy, but a lot of stuff did happen there. A lot of stuff was tested, and there was a huge NFT bull run, a lot of rug pulls, and a lot of scams, and a lot of things. So I think that we now have kind of maybe an opportunity to learn from the past, and maybe we can see what worked well, what didn't work well, and then bring it back to the God chain and see what happens. But I think there is definitely a different vibe here in terms of building stuff on Bitcoin compared to other chains. I feel like even just looking at Twitter Spaces and things like that, as silly as it is, when you go on other chains' Twitter Spaces, it's just an absolute shill fest. And just one person can't wait for the other person to shut up before the next person can shill their own thing. And that's just not the case. I've felt on the Bitcoin scene, it's like, especially the Ordinals show, etc. Everyone's just genuinely interested in what you're building and excited for what you're building as well. And you know, it's a competitive space for building competitive products, but we're doing it in a way where it's like, hey, kudos, man, that's a really cool thing you did, you know. And I think that's just not something really you get in other chains. So long may that live, and I hope it evolves more like that and doesn't kind of go down the wrong path. And then, yeah, I think just building on Bitcoin generally just has a better feeling about it. I don't know why, I can't really put words on it.
Yeah, do you know who I think is really thinking of Bitcoin as a canvas?
Who?
So, not surprisingly, Casey actually. And I don't mean in the sense that, you know, it's not necessarily only about like inscribing things, but just the idea of creating the Ordinals protocol itself. That is imagining Bitcoin as a canvas where you can create any type of. And so he thought of Bitcoin as, okay, I'm going to write a meta protocol on top of the system, and I'm going to like exploit the Taproot script and use it so that I could just dump arbitrarily large data blobs in there. And I think that is like when I think about Bitcoin as a canvas. Even I went to the other Bitcoin conference, the Bitcoin Amsterdam conference, and there's a guy named Robin Linus there from the ZeroSync team, and he basically thought that, well, why don't I put like an entire computer, an optimistic computer, into tap scripts using binary logic gates so that I can execute arbitrarily complex computation on Bitcoin that's never been done before. That is really like taking Bitcoin as a canvas, and I think that, you know, that is what we lost, like with the laser IMAX, is thinking of Bitcoin as a canvas, not only for art and what terms of what types of data we inscribe there, but really just thinking outside the box and how can we, you know, what can we do within the confines of Bitcoin? And there are other people here in the audience. I know there's some Chainway people that are building sovereign ZK rollups on top of Bitcoin. And we're doing that with Taproot Wizards too, by the way. So that is also like treating Bitcoin as a real canvas for your protocols. So there's more than just the art itself. It's also like, just take the whole Bitcoin system and think, what can I actually do with this? What can I build on top of this system? So, and this has started to happen this year. It wasn't like that culture is almost evaporated out of Bitcoin, and that's happening again now, thanks to, you know, Casey leading the way. So, you know, that's the thing that makes me the most bullish on Bitcoin these days.
We're bullish on Bitcoin. I'm bullish on Bitcoin Season 2. Maybe at the next Bitcoin Amsterdam conference, we'll see a whole stage dedicated to this new era of new Bitcoiners. So thank you guys for joining, and shout out to Aaron and the Ord core team for making this happen. This is very cool.
And I think there's one more panel, and then I think, you know, join the Ordinal show live. That could be fun. After a couple drinks, of course.
Yes, yeah, you have a decent BAC to go on the Ordinal show tonight.